Here we go. How's it going, everybody? Sweet. YouTube is up. Waiting on Facebook to connect. Got me some Brahms. It's going to be good. There it is. One more. Still waiting on Facebook to connect. That'll be good. What time is it? Oh, we still have like 5 minutes. There's Facebook. Hello, everybody on YouTube. There we go. Still got to get my stuff situated. There it is. Here we go. Facebook's still connecting. Connected. Here we are. What's going on, everybody? We are here. Facebook's connected. YouTube's connected. And this is all good. Let me make sure all my settings are right. And yeah. Let you guys come on in. Going live. Here we go. Yeah, YouTube. How many people do we have watching right now on YouTube? There are so many people watching on YouTube. What's going on, everybody? Oh, not quite 6 o'clock yet. We still got a few more minutes, just like 3 more minutes. Here we go. We're live on Facebook now. Finally. Here we go. Just going to put this right there. That's good. Make sure my settings are right. Good settings. Here we go. Very nice. Cool. So as people kind of trickle in, that'll be great. Okay, what's going on, guys? Ignore the, ignore the Brahms. It's just, I think I realized just now that I schedule these lives, youth ministry lives, right smack during dinner time. Can you guys hear that? ASMR, youth ministry, right there. This is the, if you're wondering, this is the Brahms number 15. Did you know that you can just order 2 chicken tenders if you're not that hungry or you don't want that much cholesterol? You can opt for the number 2 chicken tenders. But when you do that, you absolutely have to get the Brahms sauce. If you ever watched Good Burger with Keenan and Kel, I might be dating myself a little bit, maybe not too much, but when I grew up, Nickelodeon, watching Keenan and Kel, that was the bomb, and all that, pretty much the kid version of SNL. And then they came out with a movie called Good Burger. And Good Burger, Kel made his secret sauce. It was amazing. All right, let's see how many people we got in here. Cool. Yeah, so Brahms right here. Good stuff. So this week we are not, actually I don't have a controlled video this week. You had seen all of the tree stuff that I've been doing. I've been creating some reflections with that, and it's been going great. I'm going to take a sip of my vanilla shake right here. And it's good. I'm going to check on Facebook on my phone. I am live right now at a studio in Grapevine, Texas. And Grapevine is actually where I live. We love it here in Grapevine. Love my Arlington people too. But today we're actually going to talk about pretty much my grassroots. So pretty much how I came from Arlington, pretty much. Actually, believe it or not, I was baptized by Father Tom Stabile at St. Maria Goretti. I was a few months old, but that's where my mom grew up. That's where my dad grew up. They both went to church there. Funny enough, that's actually where those gardens right there outside the Adoration Chapel, that's where I proposed to my wife. So that's beautiful, isn't it? All right, moving on. So I actually was baptized at St. Maria Goretti by Father Tom Stabile. But then my family, we lived off of like Arkansas and Little Road, kind of near like Lake Arlington Baptist Church, LABC. I went to Vacation Bible School there one summer because my mom registered us or forgot to register us for the one at St. Vincent's. And so we went to the Baptists for our VBS that summer. But yeah, our house is right there. And so St. Vincent's was a lot closer to that house than it was to St. Maria Goretti. So then our parents decided to register at St. Vincent's. And then from then on, received the rest of my sacraments at St. Vincent's. I received First Communion when I was either like 9 or 10. And then when I was about 16 years old, I received my confirmation at St. Vincent's. Reconciliation too, along with First Communion. The only sacrament that I haven't received at St. Vincent's other than baptism was the sacrament of marriage. I actually got married at St. Elizabeth Ann Seton in Keller. That's the parish where my wife belonged. And it was a beautiful ceremony in that, we had a bunch of family, a bunch of friends there, but I actually studied in Rome for a period. And I studied in Rome for 4 months and I arrived in Rome, I think February 2nd of 2013. And when we arrived in Rome, me and my classmates, there were a bunch of seminarians in my group. If you don't know what a seminarian is someone who is studying to be a priest. For me, I was not in the seminary. Me and 3 or 4 other lay guys, just the guys that are just lay people in the church, not a seminarian. I mean, a seminarian is still technically a lay person, but we just called ourselves the lay guys. So there were 4 lay guys. There were like 15, 18 seminarians. There was also like 12 girls there too that belonged to the University of St. Thomas. And we studied at the Angelicum. That's in Rome. If you've ever been to Rome, it's right next to the Colosseum. And that's actually the school where St. John Paul II went to school. It's also known as the Pontifical University of St. Thomas. Super cool. Why did I tell you guys that? I don't know. Oh, back to my wedding at St. Elizabeth Ann Seton. It was super cool for me because my Rome formator, his name's Father Joseph Carolla. He is a Jesuit priest. He's originally from the South Texas area, but he's been teaching patristics at the Gregorian University in Rome for a really long time. Very holy man. And while I was studying in Rome, I actually bought my wife's wedding band there. I bought my wife's wedding band before I bought her engagement ring. That's how committed I was. And so the day I bought her wedding band, I went to back to our house that me and my classmates lived in, and there's a chapel in the house too, and we had the Blessed Sacrament there as well. Right after Mass, I had my to-be wife's wedding band, in that small pocket in your jeans. I don't know if girls, you have that small pocket in your jeans, but guys do. And then I pulled it out and I was like, hey, Father Carolla, will you please bless this ring? It's going to be my girlfriend's wedding band. We're going to get married. I plan on proposing to her this summer. And then not too long after that, I'm just going to put this aside. Not too long after that, I asked, after Emily said yes and we're making plans, I asked Father Carolla if he would come celebrate the wedding Mass. And he said, absolutely. Funny story is that in that wedding Mass, when it came time for the gospel, the lectionary or whatever papers that were there, since it wasn't like a weekend liturgy, the lectionary just wasn't there. So we were just using different forms of text. And it turns out what was printed out for him didn't have the entirety of the gospel. And we used the gospel, the wedding feast at Cana. And I think after the first 6 verses, like he flipped the page and the next page was just blank. And he recited the rest of that scripture passage from memory. It's crazy, absolutely crazy. But what made my wedding also just great at St. Elizabeth Ann Seton was that we had like an army of seminarians there. We had my good buddy Chad, who is an ordained priest, Mike McMahon, who's an ordained priest, Father Vince Fernandez, also an ordained priest. Like so many amazing people, Father Max Baina, man, just a bunch of amazing men who are now ordained priests in the church. Super cool. And so just to go on with a little bit of my background, like I didn't always think that I would ever be a youth minister. In fact, I'd never, ever thought I'd be this in love with Jesus Christ or this in love with this church. And so again, I grew up at St. Vincent's, grew up in the formation program. A lot of thanks to the people who helped form me at St. Vincent's. But what I understand now is that it's like a two-way street when it comes to like faith formation, catechesis, whatever you want to call it, evangelization. It's a two-way street, because you have your parents, like your family, that like your parents teach you guys how to eat, how to talk, how to walk, and then they start teaching you devotional things too. They start teaching you who God is, and your church plays a part in that too. Your church helps your parents get you to heaven. And so I had my parents doing great things. I had my church giving me great things, disposing me to the Lord extremely well. But when it came to me, I wasn't exactly partaking or fully understanding or really reciprocating what was being offered. And so again, you can have, I'm sure you find this in some relationships that don't work out, that if you're the only one loving and there's no love coming back, then man, that's not a relationship. And I think that's what happened to me at such a young age. And I had received my sacraments. I had received baptism, remember, at St. Mary Goretti. Then I received First Communion, First Reconciliation at St. Vincent's. I received my confirmation. And so I was disposed to the grace of God, but it was just that. God was disposing or expelling his grace upon me, his very own life, but I was neglecting to love God back in return. So thus there wasn't a relationship. It was just God loving me. And some people just decide to settle for that. I didn't come to this realization until years after my confirmation, the last sacrament I received at that time. And what's really nuts is that I went and got some coffee with a St. Vincent's parishioner a few days ago, 3-4 days ago. And she is 25 years old. She's graduated from OU. She has a degree in journalism and media marketing, media editing, something like that. She had a big girl job, big time job. And we went and got coffee, and she was like, "Nick, I'm interested in becoming a missionary." And me, having been a missionary, I was like, "Whoa, yeah, that sounds awesome. What do you want to talk about? What do you want to know?" We had never met before, and I could immediately tell that she was full of the life of God, just in the way that she was talking about God, just in the way that she felt convicted. She had joy, she had peace about actually leaving her job to go serve God. And so that's why she was talking to me. She knew that I had served with a missionary group called NET, the National Evangelization Team. Some of you guys might remember me as a 18, 19-year-old speaking in front of our whole church. I spoke once. You guys raised so much money for me to go be a missionary and serve on NET. And if it wasn't for that, my first year on NET, I experienced a massive, massive, massive conversion. And for the first time in my life, when I was 19 years old, that's when this whole, that one-way street of God just loving me, God just pouring his grace upon me was reciprocated. Except I'm not pouring grace upon God. I'm just loving God back in return. I'm acknowledging that and saying, thank you. I have this gratitude now. Lord, here am I now. Like, you use me as you please. Use me as you will now. So my first year as a NET missionary, I traveled all over the country. We put a lot of miles on our van. There were 11 other people on my team. We were stuck in a 12-passenger van. I mean, willingly stuck in a 12-passenger van. We had a trailer. I like to say that we were like a touring band, just we didn't really play music. We put on retreats for middle school and high school students. So we put on 108 retreats in about a 7.5-month period. And yeah, of course, I had small groups every retreat. I was giving talks every retreat. I was giving my testimony, my story every retreat. And then we would stay with host families, a different host family every night. We'd be in a different city every night, a different church every night, a different school every night. just different kids. We reached so many people. And by the time when we got home from retreat, being on retreat the whole day, the host families wanted to know all about us. And of course, we don't want them to think they've got like a stranger in the home. And so after night prayer and after like their kids would go down, we would stay up till like 1 a.m. with these parents, with the mom and dad of the house. And they wanted to know our story. We wanted to know their story. And then by the time we finally went to bed, it was like 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And we have to wake up at like 6 to pack up the house, pick up the other missionaries and head to the next city, head to the next parish, put on a similar retreat, and then do it all over again. Guys, I've seen Christ in so many people all over the country, all over the world for that matter. And it would not have, if it wasn't for St. Vincent's being such such a generous parish. If the thing that St. Vincent's has is St. Vincent's has amazing community. You find people around, just the city of Arlington that know St. Vincent's because of the goodness of the parishioners that are there, of the church members, of the membership we have. The goodness of the people that are there is what makes St. Vincent's St. Vincent's. And if it hadn't been for St. Vincent's and you guys and your generosity, I would not have experienced that my first year on net. Maybe I would have. It probably would have been a little bit harder to get to that first year, but St. Vincent's played a huge role into that, where I traveled the country, got to proclaim Jesus. But that was just it. Proclaiming Jesus' name and how he's worked in my life. That was a huge thing that I had to work on, because up until that point, when I was 19 years old, I had received my sacraments, but it was just a one-way street. God was expelling his grace upon me, pouring out his life upon me, and I was just receiving it. I wasn't giving my life back to God until I was like 18, 19, finally get a chance to serve on net. I'm going to do it. And when I got to net training, I was surrounded by 100 other missionaries from all over the country, a few from outside of the country even. And I remember looking at everybody, and I remember thinking like, man, I'm different from all these people. These people seem really holy. I didn't have that language at the time, but I was like, man, these people are just different. Like, why do they talk like that? Why are they so joyful? It seems like they know something that I don't know. And it was Jesus. I would say now that I have a degree in theology, a degree in Catholic studies, I got to study at the Angelicum in Rome. I got to see Pope Francis emerge before the church. I was there. I went to Did I say Saint Francis? Pope Francis. I went to Pope Benedict's last papal audience, his last public mass. I went to all of his last things. When we arrived in Rome, Pope Benedict announced his resignation like maybe 2 weeks later. And so I got to see all of his final public things. And then I got to see the black smoke, or all the black smoke come up from the conclave chimney, and the white smoke too. And I got to see Pope Francis. I was about a football field away from the front facade of the Vatican, St. Peter's Basilica. And again, like, I don't think that I would have been there standing in the arms of St. Peter's had it not been for the generosity of St. Vincent's and me, finally reciprocating God's love back. And again, when I was at when I was at net training, we trained for about, a month and a half, and then they send us out on the road. So they train us in how to lead small group, how to give talks and stuff like that, how to have a daily habit of prayer. Just beautiful, beautiful training. And in this one part of training, they ask you to give your personal testimony, how Jesus has worked in your life. Because the best way to do youth ministry is in story form. I could read the catechism all day long. I could read you scripture. Scripture has story, it's great. The Catholic Encyclopedia, I don't think you guys are going to be too interested in that. But when it comes to personal lived experience, I think that's what youth ministry captures. I think that's exactly what students need right now. I think that's what you need right now is personal lived experience, because you guys want what's authentic. You guys, man, students right now, you guys, your meters for let's just say inauthenticity, somebody tell me in the comments if it's inauthenticity or unauthenticity, because I just can't right now. Your meters are so good. And so when it comes to proclaiming the gospel of Jesus Christ, or when it comes to presenting the person of Jesus Christ, youth ministry has no better tool than one's personal lived testimony, their witness of Jesus Christ. And at Net Training, I was asked to develop what that was in my life. They asked me to give or to prepare a 3-minute testimony, 3 minutes, because our attention spans are so short, right? Am I right? They're so short. And when it comes to preaching the gospel, we don't want it to be boring. Of course, we want it to be interesting. We don't want to glorify sin. But at the end of the day, we want to present Jesus Christ. And so they gave me 45 minutes. They're like, okay, Nick, we were at a beautiful campsite too in Wisconsin. There's a lake there, and we were at a picnic table, and I had a smaller group. And they're like, okay, Nick, you have 45 minutes to go just like brainstorm, this testimony. Just it doesn't have to be perfect, just kind of write it out, just jot down some times, or just one time where God has worked in your life. I was like, okay, yeah, no big deal. I've received my sacraments. I'm good. Yeah, God's been loving. I've always been a part of my church. Yeah, I've prayed before every meal in my life. So I remember going to a tree and I sat down at the base of the trunk, trees again, right? And I had just this pad of paper and I had a pen, and I sat there. And I continued to sit there. And I continued to sit there. I sat there for 45 minutes, and I could not put into words one way how God had worked in my life. I couldn't put into words one way how Jesus Christ had transformed my heart for him and his church. I remember sitting there feeling so defeated and just questioning, just saying to God, like, why do you want me to be a missionary on this Net team? Why do you want me to travel the country? Why do you want me to speak in front of teens? Why do you want me to lead them in small group? Why do you want me to give a testimony that I can't even come up with? It's been 45 minutes. I'm 19 years old. I've been baptized since I was a baby. The problem is because I had been sacramentalized in the faith. Sacramentalized is just a fancy way of saying I received all my sacraments, but I never reciprocated God's love back to him. Because in order for it to be a relationship, you need to receive love, and you also need to give love. Just a little circle right there. And at that base of that tree, I didn't have this verbiage at the time, but I had realized that I had been sacramentalized, and I had never chosen to really acknowledge the grace of God and love God for that. I sat there for 45 minutes. I've always been a part of the church. I had always been a part of youth group, but I had never really understood what a relationship with Jesus Christ was until I couldn't put it, into words in a testimony. I sat there for 45 minutes. It's like, and I was supposed to go out on the road in like 3 or 4 weeks, after that. I was supposed to be giving a testimony then. Luckily, that is like a whole testimony in and of itself, because now I'm a director of youth ministry. I've been doing this for 7 years now, professionally. And before then, I worked in campus ministry in college. I went to Rome. And before I even started sharing all this, I prefaced it by saying I never, ever thought I'd be this in love with Jesus or this in love with the church. And what changed is that people were introduced in my life, that opportunity was introduced, but it required some action by myself. Because again, at the very beginning of this, I said I had great parents and I had a great church properly disposing me to the church. But it wasn't at the church in her teachings, but it required me to respond. And so here's what makes up a great testimony, okay? There are, for your 3-minute testimony, hopefully you have a pen or paper or something like that. This isn't homework by any means. Please don't feel like this is homework, but I'm going to wrap this up pretty quick because I've already been going for like 20 minutes now. But in order to make a good testimony, you have to cover these 3 things. Your first minute, Your first minute. Think of it as like an elevator pitch. If you have a business or if you have something you're really passionate about and you're stuck in an elevator with someone, like you only have 30 seconds, to tell them like what that thing that you're passionate about is all about, before they get to their floor or something like that. So think of it as an elevator pitch. Of course, God has done great things in our lives, and hopefully you can identify those things, and hopefully you can put those things in words, because if I would argue that if you can't put what God has done in your life into words, I would almost, and this is just from my experience, I would almost say that your relationship with Jesus Christ might not be present. Or maybe you do have a relationship with Jesus Christ, it's just not as strong as you think it is. That's probably a better way of putting it. If you can't put down on paper, if you can't tell someone ultimately, specifically what Jesus has done in your life, I would say that your relationship with him is not as strong as you think. And so in that first minute, in your 3-minute testimony, in that first minute, I want you to tell your audience, tell the other person who you were in life before this one instance happened. That whatever this one instance was, maybe it was a retreat, maybe it happened at school, where you really understood like God's love and you felt like Jesus working and you responded in that kind of way. Maybe it was the death of a family member where you started really understanding these things. For me, actually, you know what? I'm just going to give you a quick 3-minute testimony. Please don't time me, because it would be a lot easier to explain those 3 points in your 3-minute testimony if I just give you one. Here's the one that I roughly gave while I was on net all over the country. Okay, you ready? Here we go. Actually, I'm going to take a drink of my milkshake. Hold on. Let's see how many people are tuning in first. Cool. Wow, we have 17,000 people right now on Facebook. Let's see how many people we got on YouTube. Yeah, again, we have 1,000 people watching on YouTube. That's great. Okay, here we go. Here's what I gave in my time on net. Okay, ready? Here we go. Imagine 19-year-old Nick, okay? I probably looked very similar. Okay, here we go. Hi, everybody. My name is Nick Gutierrez. I'm from Arlington, Texas, and I would like to share with you a little bit how God has worked in my life. I grew up Catholic and was a part of a great church, had a great family, but a relationship with Jesus was something that was very foreign to me. I never knew what that was. Now, my parents brought me and my brother to Mass every single Sunday. We never missed, and we prayed before every single meal. Eventually, it got to the point where I was interested enough in the faith to go to youth group. And at youth group, I primarily only went because there was pizza there was soda there, and I went there to meet girls, pretty much. And so, just being very honest with you guys. But while I was there at youth group, there were a few nights that, kind of stuck out to me, where I know now that Jesus was prodding me for something, and I wasn't able to really recognize what was going on. But I remember that some nights I actually started paying attention just a little bit. Also, growing up, I was really into sports. I played baseball for the longest time. I was actually in gymnastics for the longest time, believe it or not. And I was in gymnastics for such a long time at such a young age. And I competed in club too. My parents paid a lot of money in tuition for me to be a gymnast. I actually treated gymnastics as if it was part of my identity. It consumed me. People at school knew that I was a gymnast. People on the baseball team knew I was a gymnast. Football team knew I was a gymnast. Just stuff like that. And these other sports that I played in too. Gymnastics was a huge, huge part of my life. And I remember when I was really little, maybe like 6 or 7, my club coach at the time said, Nick, girls really like boys that are in gymnastics. And I was like, yeah, they do. I'm in this sport for life. And so meanwhile, just growing up, in the church, going to Mass, praying for meals, also going to youth group, I was also heavily invested in athletics, namely gymnastics. I remember in my 10th grade year, I was 16 years old, and it was about time for my confirmation. I remember I went on a retreat, our confirmation retreat. And I remember I had to miss some practices because of that. I might have missed, some other things too. Actually, in fact, my 10th grade year, right before competition season, I blew out my right knee. I tore my ACL and I tore my meniscus for the first time in my life since I was 6 years old, I could not compete in the sport. I could not do the thing that I embraced my identity in. I could not do gymnastics. So I was already a little angry for other things that had transpired in my life. But you know, when something happens to you, you always try to look and cast the blame. And so when you can't find anybody to blame for you blowing your knee out, you know, while doing gymnastics, you end up blaming God for things. And I ended up like resenting, you know, God, blaming God for, you know, God, why did you do this to my knee? You know, I remember going on this confirmation retreat. I remember they gave us a time to pray, you know, a time to actually talk to God if we've never done that before, to talk to God as if we were talking to a friend. And I remember just laying on the ground and I remember just talking to God. They gave us a pen and paper. I chose not to really use that. But I remember for the first time in my life, you know, I was away from other people. You know, it was a quiet time of reflection. And it was one of the first times in my life that I had actually understood what God's love was. And this prayer came out, not of my mouth. I was just praying it in silence. But I remember saying this prayer in my head, saying this prayer in my heart. And I remember saying, Jesus, I want you to be my everything in my life. Jesus, I don't understand you. I don't really understand what's going on with my knee. I don't understand all this. Honestly, Jesus, I don't even know if you're real. I remember thinking those emotions. But I remember praying, Jesus, I love you. Jesus, I want you to be everything in my life. After that confirmation retreat, I remember going to youth group and things, you know, started getting a little better. I started paying attention a little bit more at Mass. And I remember wanting to do more for God. And I remember it was just that simple acknowledgement of just like, God, yes, you're here and I want to follow you. Unfortunately, though, things started to go like a little south, even to the point where I try to make myself forget that initial prayer to Jesus ever happened. That initial prayer of me saying, Jesus, I love you. Jesus, I want you to be my everything. And what's beautiful about that is that I remembered Jesus doing something when I was 16 years old, laying on the floor at that campsite that we were at. And I remember encountering him for the first time. And I sit here before you now as a youth minister. No matter how deep in the trenches you might feel like in life, no matter how far away from God that you think that you are, God's love knows no bounds. God's going to love you. And he's going to pick you up provided that you want him to. And so with whoever you meet in life and whoever you want to become like, I promise you, if there's any goodness in a person, it is because of the goodness of God. It's because of the goodness of Jesus Christ that they have encountered, or the mystical truth that Jesus is. And so here we go. In three little points. Your first point in your personal testimony is explaining who you were and what had transpired in your life before you encountered Jesus. So that first minute, be sure to explain, just kind of where you grew up, where you came from, the important people in your life, and just key elements that pertain to that one instance. Your second minute, I've already been going for 30 minutes now. I'm so sorry. Your second minute is the introduction of exactly what did Jesus do? How did you encounter Jesus? Because I think so many of our testimonies happen like this. So many of our testimonies happen like, I was this way before. I did drugs. I partied, a lot. I said a lot of bad words and bad things about people. But then I went on this one retreat, and then everything was magical. Everything got better. And then after that, just lived my life. I feel like that's how people's stories about God, are, that people's testimonies are. And that's really just general. It's really ambiguous. It leaves God to be this like ambiguous figure. It's like, here I was a sinner. Then I went on this retreat and everything was better. And now I'm better. But the fact of the matter that my testimony was like, okay, yeah, here's who I was. Maybe I wasn't like deep in the trenches of sin, but I just didn't really know God. And I specifically said, here on this retreat, I felt for the first time, I felt compelled to say, Jesus, I love you. And Jesus, I want you to be my everything. Guys, that's an encounter with Jesus. That's specific. Like the Holy Spirit prompted me to pray that prayer. And I said yes to that prayer to Jesus. And then after that, I didn't say everything was perfect. I didn't say that I was a perfect human being. I mean, I know that I am. Tell my wife that. But I didn't say that because even after that, I try to make myself forget that initial prayer to Jesus ever happened. And so again, your first minute, you say just kind of who you are, just what was going on, just create just like a framework for setting up for how you're going to explain what specifically did Jesus do in your life. And then when you, and also in that first part, try not to glorify sin too much because your personal testimony is about Jesus. It's not so much about you. Of course, you're involved, but don't glorify, don't overshare about whatever thing that you could have struggled with. I think people kind of get the gist if you give them enough. So in your second minute, you say exactly what Jesus, how you encountered Jesus. And then that third minute, you talk about what life is like now. And you talk about the struggles and also the joys of acknowledging that encounter with Jesus, and actually even the ability to share that. And that's just the hardest thing too. I like to tell students that, or students who are in missionary training, I like to tell them that you know that you are a disciple, a full follower of Jesus Christ, when you can help make another disciple in return. A lot of people get confused why St. Vincent's, the brick and mortar building, exists in Arlington. Sure, we have great picnics. We got a great choir. We have an amazing pastor. Yeah, of course, yes. But our church exists. Yeah, actually, let me just ask you this. If somebody were to ask you, why does our church exist? What would you tell them? What exactly would you say? If somebody says, why does your church exist? You might be like fumbling, balking a little bit. You're just like, well, it's a great place, Would you feel confident in your answer? Just like, well, it's great. It's great. Our parking lines just got repainted. It's true. But no, when somebody says like, why does your church exist? I'm going to tell you why exactly St. Vincent's exists in Arlington. Because St. Vincent's exists in Arlington because God wanted this church built. God wanted this church to have a pastor. God wanted this church to have sheep. And God wanted this church to witness Jesus Christ's love to the community and city of Arlington. St. Vincent's exists to make disciples. St. Vincent's doesn't exist to have all these clubs and all these ministries, but of course, all these clubs and all these ministries have this end goal, end purpose, mission, some would say, to create disciples. In Matthew 28, Jesus says, go out and make disciples of all nations. This is the mission of the Catholic Church. This is the mission of St. Vincent's. And if you've never shared with someone how you've encountered Jesus Christ, your personal testimony, your witness, as I said earlier, I would say that your relationship isn't as strong. Your relationship with God isn't as strong as you think it is if you can't put it into words. Because ultimately, when you go see a new movie, and maybe this movie has been, just like, it's been built up and you've waited like a year and a half maybe to see this movie. You saw the trailer was amazing, and you were telling people about the trailer. Then you went and saw the movie. The popcorn was great. You got really bloated with all the soda too. The movie was amazing, right? After you go see the movie, what do? You tell people about it. You don't really have to like prepare, right? You don't really have to like study and like prepare like, oh man, I'm going to tell John about this movie that I saw, but what do I want to tell him? I'm going to write it down. Like, no, like when you see the movie and then you go see John or you go see somebody else, like it just comes out of you. You're like, hey bro, did you see that movie? They're like, no, I haven't seen it yet. And somebody else is just like, oh yeah, I saw the movie. And you guys just talk about it. Guys, when you encounter the love of God, sometimes you don't need a notepad. Sometimes you don't need a pen. Sometimes you don't need to sit at the base of a tree to really figure it out. Because when you authentically encounter the love of God, it's just going to come out. It's just going to come out of you. Some other people also say that if you're Catholic, if you're a Christian, you don't share the love of God through your personal witness, your personal testimony, and specifically how you encountered Jesus. They'll say that you don't share your faith, you don't share this good news because you're not fully convinced that it's good news. And man, the first time I heard that, I was like, man, I don't share my testimony. 7 years in as a professional youth minister, even when I'm going to Brahms, here or going elsewhere in Grapevine or in Arlington, why don't I take the opportunity to really tell people about how Christ had encountered, or I had encountered Jesus Christ? And that's probably another episode too, is there's times for appropriate evangelization and there's inappropriate evangelization. I'm sure we've all seen, standing on a box with a big megaphone with a big sign. Nobody's going to change. Nobody's going to reach interior conversion and assent the will and say yes to Jesus with a sign that's saying everything they've done wrong. But rather, they might reach interior conversion with a story, with something authentic, with something that you've experienced yourself via a story, via a testimony. I want to encourage you. I want to close out this 36-minute segment. This was supposed to be like 15 minutes. I want to close this out by inviting you tonight to pray and say, God, I want to know how to tell people about you. God, I've been in this church for so long. God, I've never really even thought of putting into words or putting in writing specifically how I've encountered you. But God, for your glory, I want to do it. If you pray that prayer, I promise you God's going to respond. I promise you that God's going to put people in your life that are going to help you with that. But it also requires you to respond. Again, we don't want this one-way street. We want this reciprocation of love. Peace out, guys. My Brahms has been sitting here for this whole 36 minutes. It's cold. It's not bad. My Brahms sauce has been calling me this entire time. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in, youth ministry people. I will see you next week. Next week, we're probably going to go back to our controlled videos. We have something in the queue, and I just personally think it's funny. And so I'll catch you guys next time. Peace out. Let's end this, YouTubers. Peace out. Bye, YouTubers. Love you long time. Peace.